In the name of the Holy and Undivided Trinity. Amen. Somehow or other, we all made it here again this morning after one more week of feeling like strangers in a strange land. For months, we've been feeling exposed to more attacks on human dignity than we know how to handle. We're starting to wonder if we are still living in the same country we thought we knew. I'm hoping, of course, that some of us have managed to hold on to some prayerful combination of serenity, courage, and wisdom through all that's happening, to use the words of that oft-quoted serenity prayer. But even if you've held on to the serenity to accept what you can't change, the courage to change what you can, and the wisdom to know the difference, you're still probably feeling, at the very least, dislocated. Almost 2,600 years ago, the prophet Jeremiah wrote a letter to some people who were not just feeling dislocated. They had been physically dislocated from Jerusalem to Babylon. They were forced to live in a land filled with people they had been taught to hate, and who had been taught to hate them in return. Some of their favorite prophets had been assuring them about that this was just a brief setback that would be over soon. Jeremiah had a more sober outlook on their future. Things were not about to change overnight, he said. It was going to take a lot more time. So this was Jeremiah's advice. Settle in for the long haul. Build houses, plant crops, start families, and most importantly, seek the welfare of the city, the welfare of this hostile place where you have found yourselves, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. Maybe that sounds like a cop-out, like telling us all just to keep our heads down, stay uninvolved, and hope things change on their own. I'm, of course, very tempted to do just that these days, and so are many of the rest of us, I'm wagering. But I don't think we need to hear Jeremiah's words that way. We can hear Jeremiah's words of advice as reminders of how to keep hope for a better world alive when our usual channels of resistance and change are getting undermined and sometimes overtly attacked. We don't need to hear them as put-downs of demonstrations or prayer vigils or protests. They're reminders of what we still need to do, need to keep doing, when demonstrations and prayer vigils and protests still are not yielding the results we wanted. They're reminders of what we are always called to do, regardless of how our wider communities and institutions respond to us. Seek the welfare of the city, the welfare of the place where you have found yourself, whether it's friendly or hostile. Seek its welfare prayerfully, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. Centuries before Jesus told us to start doing good not only just to our neighbors but to our enemies, Jeremiah called us to the same practices. Seek the welfare of the city. Last Sunday, if you stuck around for the forum afterwards, you heard Bishop Jeff use a word most of us had not heard before. The word was refugia, R-E-F-U-G-I-A, refugia. He got the word, he said, from an address our own Mother Suzanne delivered at the last annual meeting of that other All Saints parish in Chicago, where she's now the rector. Refugia. I think we could stand to get more familiar with this new term as we think about our own calling in these troubled times, as a way to seek the welfare of the city, this tumultuous place where we find ourselves these days. Here's how Suzanne described the word, borrowing from the work of a biologist she had been reading. Refugia is a biological term describing places of shelter where life endures in times of crisis. Ideally, these refugia endure, expand, and connect so that new life emerges. A perfect example, she said, is Mount St. Helens, which erupted in 1980, losing 1,300 feet of height and turned into a moonscape of hot ash and debris. Scientists thought it would take generations for life to return. However, only 40 years later, Mount St. Helens is covered in lush green grasses, bushes, and trees. Streams run and creatures have homes. And this growth began almost right away because there were some protected places, moss and fern protected by rotting logs, boulders protecting the holes and tunnels of small creatures. These little pockets of safety are refugia. In them life endured, then flourished to spread outward. And that, she said, is what a place like All Saints can be, whether it's All Saints Chicago or All Saints Indianapolis. A place of flourishing, a micro-counterculture where we gain strength and spiritual capacity to face the challenges ahead. It's another way of thinking about that All Saints motto I love to repeat: altar-centered social concern. Refugia, micro-countercultures, where those of us seeking the welfare of the city gain strength and spiritual capacity to face the challenges ahead. It's a micro-counterculture we can work at building right here amidst the demonstrations and protests and prayer vigils that we would also do well to join as best we can. It can sustain us when we're just not sure if any of these wider activities are getting the results we long for. Seek the welfare of the city, the welfare of the place where you have found yourself, whether it's friendly or hostile. Seek its welfare prayerfully, for in its welfare you will find your welfare. Be that micro-counterculture. Practice altar-centered social concern. Refugia. Amen.